Welcome back, everyone, to DA Sports. I'm your host, DASASIN. This is episode number 5. I want to welcome everybody back. We have a lot to cover in this episode. We got to recap Saturday Night Football from this weekend. Even though we didn't get to it in the last episode, just from timing perspective, we want to recap some of the games from Saturday. Obviously, we got to recap football from Sunday. We also need to recap the Monday night games that just occurred. We're going to get into my picks for the week, and then we're also going to finish off with my top 5 and worst 5 after NFL week number 3. All right, so let's get into it. So to start off, we got to talk about Saturday's NCAA football games. There were a bunch of huge games, a bunch of huge matchups, interesting things to talk about. So I'm going to touch on 3 different points. One, of course, one of the biggest games of the weekend, and of course for me personally, my favorite game to watch, which was Michigan versus USC. For those of you who saw episode 1 where I talked about my favorite teams, I did say that Michigan is my favorite college football team, but I also did mention that I do cheer for USC's football team if Michigan isn't playing. So essentially, this is the only game of the season where I don't cheer for USC, and I knew it was going to be an exciting game. To be honest, I didn't do predictions for this weekend, but I actually did think USC was going to get the win based on how Michigan looked in previous games and how USC looked in previous games. But I was gladly wrong. So it was a huge win by Michigan. They really welcomed USC into Big Ten football, pretty much just ran the ball down their throat. I know that USC has struggled with their defense in recent years, but a lot of that came from pass defense. I think their defense has still improved from previous years, but definitely not improved enough in the run defense to match up with Michigan's style, especially with Orji starting at the quarterback for Michigan. It was very run heavy, and essentially just got punched in the mouth over and over and over again, and weren't able to capitalize on opportunities that they had, and weren't able to get crucial stops when they needed to. So it was a huge win, huge welcome from a Big Ten standard as in Michigan, and then the newcomer in USC. I definitely think there'll be a lot more big games to come down the line, more exciting confrontations between the 4 new teams in the Big Ten and some of the Big Ten big dogs that have been there and want to kind of show their dominance in that it's still their conference. Other than that, the most exciting game actually of Saturday was Colorado Buffaloes and the Baylor Bears. For those that didn't see the game, you definitely missed out. It came down to the last seconds. You had a receiver drop a wide open pass with like 3 seconds left, which would have scored a touchdown and taken the game into overtime, to then Shedeur Sanders having to scramble while it was raining, throw essentially a Hail Mary to the only receiver who was on that side of the field, and he was able to slide on the ground and make the catch in the end zone. They kicked the extra point, went into overtime, and then were able to pull off the win in overtime against Baylor with none other than Travis Hunter causing a fumble on the goal line to stop Baylor from tying the game up and sending the game into double overtime. Speaking of Travis Hunter, I don't care what anybody says. Travis Hunter is the best college football player in the world right now. His impact on offense is like elite level receiver. His impact on defense is elite level corner. And it's not like he's in like, a package of plays. If you think about like some of the greats like Charles Woodson, who played defense all of the time, and then they would put him in sparingly for packages here and there on offense. And in most cases, players play both ways. It's usually like, they predominantly play one thing, but then they get sprinkles at the other side. No, Travis Hunter is an elite corner and an elite receiver, which is absolutely crazy. And he plays over 100 plays per game, which is just ridiculous. So I don't want to hear any debate. Even as Colorado starts facing tougher competition and they inevitably are going to start taking losses, like this week they have UCF, they're favored to lose by 14 points. Even if they lose the game, if Travis Hunter continues to have the impact that he's having and is productive on both sides of the ball, he definitely should get the Heisman. But we'll see how it comes out, because a lot of times with the Heisman, it goes to somebody who's on like the winningest team or close to the winningest team. So we'll see how it goes, but he's definitely got to be in the finalists regardless. Even if Colorado doesn't win another game, he's got to be invited to the final ceremony nonetheless. So the last college game that I want to talk about is one that was considered a big upset, when in reality I don't think it was as big of an upset as it was. But for people not knowing, it was James Madison against North Carolina. Now, James Madison for the longest time was an FCS school, so they didn't play the big D1 schools. But recently, I believe they moved up maybe a few years ago or so. And this Saturday, they beat North Carolina 70-50. Yeah, that's right. Not a basketball team, just football score. 70-50. James Madison over North Carolina. At the half, it was 53-21. If you get 53 points put up on you in the first half, like, that's pretty ridiculous. One thing that people don't realize, like if you weren't very aware of James Madison, last year James Madison had a good team too. They actually started off 10-0 and had a big game. They ended up finishing the season, I believe, 11-2, losing their second to last game to App State, and then they lost their bowl game. But before that, they were 10-0, so they had a good start, the same way they're doing now. They're undefeated, 4-0 so far in the season. And actually, the coach for James Madison last year actually is coaching the head coach at Indiana this year. And Indiana is 4-0 to start this year with the same coach. So James Madison has definitely created a culture where they're ready to play some of the big boys. And they proved it on Saturday by sticking their foot in North Carolina. Now, beyond Saturday, we got to get into Sunday and talk about some NFL football. All right, so to start, we're going to talk about my picks. So for those who are new to the channel, I do a set of picks every week before the games. I do a pick 3 where I just pick 3 games. Then I do a lock of the week where I'm like, this is the game that I'm think is the most likely team to win above all the others. And then I have an underdog pick of the week. So we'll start with the pick 3. So this week in my pick 3, I did go 3-0. I had the Steelers winning, and they did win over the Chargers. I had the Vikings beating the Texans, even though they were underdogs. They did win. And then I also had the Ravens, who were favored by 1 point, to beat the Cowboys, and they did win and cover the spread for that matter. So I was 3-0 this week on my pick 3. So far for the season, I'm 4-2 on the pick 3. Obviously, I didn't do it for week 1, so that's just between week 2 and week 3. So 4-2 overall in the pick 3 choices, which is a decent start so far. Unfortunately, so far this season, I've had a curse when it comes to my lock of the week. For those that don't remember, the previous week, my lock of the week was the Ravens over the Raiders, and they lost. And my lock of the week this week was supposed to be Tampa Bay over the Broncos, and they lost. Not only did Tampa Bay lose, but they got smacked. They got smacked from the very beginning of the game all the way to the end. Denver dominated them like as if the roles were reversed. And Denver jumped into Tampa Bay's jerseys, and Tampa Bay jumps into Denver's jerseys, because it was just absolutely ridiculous. Even from the start of the game, I was watching another game first, and I was looking at the score, and I was like, wait, that can't be right. Like, somebody's messing up the score, right? Nope. And then I tuned to the game, and I'm like, this is ridiculous. Where is the Tampa team from the previous week that was giving it to Detroit? And it's like, that's one of those things that makes the NFL great. You just never know. Any given Sunday, any team can win. And this Sunday, Denver looked like the better team than Tampa Bay. Even though I don't think they are overall, they definitely look like it on the field on Sunday. And then the last game was my underdog pick of the week. For those that don't know, the underdog pick of the week is like the long shot team who's favored to lose by more than 3 points that I'm predicting to win the game. Now, I said before I made the pick, I didn't have much faith in it because I didn't really like any of the ones that were that large of underdog. There were several teams that were that large of an underdog that won, like the Carolina Panthers and the Washington Commanders. But I picked the Jacksonville Jaguars, and anybody who saw the Monday night game, the Jaguars got destroyed. I mean, absolutely just wiped off the map from the first quarter. It was never really close, and Josh Allen basically proved that there's a huge distance between him and Trevor Lawrence. So that's how it went for the underdog pick of the week. So I'm 0-1 this week. I did hit last week, so I'm 1-1 on the year in terms of underdog pick of the week. Now, in talking about Trevor Lawrence being bad, it brought me to an idea of a new segment for once a week where it's going to be my question of the week. Now, for the question of the week, I'm going to pose a question to you guys that I want you to chime in on, give me feedback from as far as what you think your opinion is of it, and then I'm going to comment on it in the next episode. So, the question of the week is, who is the most overpaid quarterback in the league? And I'm going to give you 5 options, and I'm going to give you 5 different reasons why each of these quarterbacks might be considered the most overpaid quarterback in the league. And I want you guys' feedback to tell me which one you think is the most overpaid based on their production. Okay? So for start, I'm going to talk about Trevor Lawrence. Trevor Lawrence is now one of the highest paid quarterbacks in the league. And if you watched tonight's game, he looked off. And with the injuries he had last year, you know, he came into the league as the number 1 overall pick. There was so much hype about him being the next great quarterback, and he hasn't quite lived up to it. He's had moments during seasons, stretches, 10-game stretches here and there. But overall, does he deserve to be one of the top? I think he's like top 3 highest paid in the league right now. So, I don't know. You tell me. So, it's between Trevor Lawrence. The other one is Deshaun Watson. Obviously, Deshaun Watson is the one who has the most guaranteed dollars ever given in a contract. Now, his contract was given to him, I believe, 3 years ago now. And Cleveland still looks terrible. And he's still making a lot of money. So, he's another option. Another option is Tua Tagovailoa. He was one of the people who got the most recent contract. When he's not in the top 3 or so in being paid, but with him being out now, with him being missing most of the season 2 years ago, with his concussion history, could he be the most overpaid quarterback just because he's not able to play because of concussions? Which also brings me to another person who has missed a lot of time, is Joe Burrow. His team is also 0-3. He has a track record of starting off seasons slow. Even last year, they started off poorly also. And he's one of the highest paid quarterbacks. Yes, he had a season where they made it to the Super Bowl, but if you're going to be considered a top 3 quarterback in the entire league, is he given enough production to match that price tag? So he's an option. And then the 5th option is Dak Prescott. Now, he just signed the largest contract ever, and the Cowboys are currently 1-2. So you tell me, does he deserve to be the highest paid quarterback and they're not producing and he doesn't really produce in the playoffs? So those are your 5 options. Trevor Lawrence, Deshaun Watson, Tua Tagovailoa, Joe Burrow, and Dak Prescott. Which one is the most overpaid quarterback in the league? That is the question of the week. After that, we're going to move into just a quick recap from the Monday Night Football games. I'll start with the Jags and Bills since that was the game. Not only was that game first, but I kind of touched on it a little bit with my underdog pick of the week and talking about Trevor Lawrence. For starters, I'm going to start with the good. Josh Allen has really made the Bills GM feel great about his decisions of letting some of the veterans they had go, letting some of the receivers that he had go. A lot of this team is built on the back of Josh Allen performing. And so far this season, he's shown that he can do that. Seems like he can handle the load. Now, there is a caveat. I say that all the teams that they've beaten so far this season, I don't expect any of those teams to make the playoffs. But a sign of a good team is beating the teams you're supposed to beat. And especially if you can do it in impressive fashion, which he has done so far. So you can't, fault him too much for that. And especially the performance he put on tonight against Jacksonville, he looked top tier. Probably one of the best quarterback performances of the year so far. Speaking of top quarterback performances of the year, though, he is slightly challenged by the quarterback in the other Monday Night Football game, the one that was mostly a surprise to people, which was the Washington Commanders beating the Cincinnati Bengals. Jaden Daniels looked great. He broke the rookie quarterback record for highest completed percentage in a game ever with 91%. I believe he was 21 of 23, which is just absolutely fantastic. And it wasn't like all of his passes were just dink and dunk, screen passes and 2-yard slant routes. No, he was throwing deep. He hit Terry McLaurin on a few deep routes when he was pressed with cover zero and he had a blitzer in his face, had to take some shots as he was releasing the ball. And he's not a big quarterback. Like, he's got good height, but he's not like 240 or something like that. Like, he's a very slender quarterback, but he was able to sit in the pocket, take hits, and deliver deep balls. Great performance by him. Great upset by the Commanders. I have to say, with the Commanders being 2-1, that even though I don't expect them to make the playoffs this year, they definitely have a good nucleus of players to grow from. They've got their quarterback. They got Terry McLaurin, who's a young receiver who's rising in the ranks. They've got a good running back tandem with Brian Robinson Jr. and Austin Eckler. Eckler did go out during this game, but hopefully he's okay. But overall, yeah, they definitely have some pieces to build around, and they look pretty impressive. Cincinnati on the other side, I mean, it's just like every year. They can't start off well. Previously, there was like whispers around commentators talking about Joe Burrow. Maybe he's lost it. That clearly isn't the case. Joe Burrow played pretty good today, hitting Jamar Chase on some great deep passes. And it just was Cincinnati's defense couldn't hold up to stop Washington. And so Joe Burrow couldn't get the job done. But overall, the Monday Night Football games were entertaining for two different reasons. The Washington game was entertaining because it ended up being close and there was a lot of points scored. The Buffalo game was entertaining because it was just like, watching the Hulk slam Loki from side to side. But entertaining nonetheless. So to finish off this week, I am going to leave you with my top 5 and worst 5 rankings after NFL week number 3. Now, for those that are new, I've always said before, if you are undefeated, you will not drop below somebody who's lost a game. And if you are winless, you will not rise against somebody who's already won at least one game. So, with there being only 5 undefeated teams left in the league, guess what? All 5 of those teams are in the top 5. I believe there are now 3 teams that are winless, and of course, those are the bottom 3 teams in the list. So let's get to the rankings specifically. At number 1, I'm going with the Minnesota Vikings. They had an impressive win over the Houston Texans. The Texans were previously in my top 5, and Minnesota beat them down from jump. They looked like they didn't even belong on the same field. It was one of my pick 3, and I did think Minnesota was going to win the game, but I didn't expect them to beat them so easily. I think the most impressive part for Minnesota is their defense. The way Brian Flores has them flying around and just destroying teams has been excellent. We know that Justin Jefferson is great on the offensive side. We know that Sam Darnold has the tools. It was the reason why he was originally a high draft pick. So, people kind of expected the offense to be okay, but nobody really thought about how well this defense was going to be, and their defense has been tremendous. So, I got to put Minnesota at number 1. I think they had one of the most impressive wins of the week, considering that they also beat another really good team. At number 2, I'm going with the Kansas City Chiefs. Yes, I had them at number 1 last week. They still did get the win, and they still are undefeated. But again, it was another game that came down to the wire. In this game, the defense was the ones that finished it off with Nick Bolton making a tackle for loss on Bijan Robinson. It was a great defensive stand. Leo Chanel pushed 2 people in the backfield to open up the lane for Nick Bolton to scrape down and make the tackle in the backfield before Bijan could turn upfield. And it was definitely an excellent win on the road. I believe it was the first road game for the Chiefs. So good win for them. And even Patrick Mahomes came out afterwards and said that he's not playing his best. Travis Kelce still hasn't gone over 100 yards combined for the season yet they're still getting wins. So can't complain about that. And they remain at number 2 for now. At number 3, I have the Pittsburgh Steelers. Now, Pittsburgh is all based on their defense. They are another team that was a part of my pick 3 that I said would win because they stylistically matched up well with the Chargers and their smash mouth run type of offense. They got the job done again, limiting the other team to only 10 points. Their defense is ferocious. They fly around every single game. You can always tell what a Mike Tomlin team looks like because they play hard and they just get after it every single play. And you can tell everybody plays for each other. And they definitely had a good win against the Chargers, who were undefeated coming into the game. So I have Pittsburgh at number 3. At number 4, I have the Buffalo Bills. Again, another one of the last undefeated teams. Josh Allen looked great tonight, destroying Jacksonville. The only reason I have Buffalo at 4 and not higher is, like I said, I don't think any of the teams that they have faced are really good. Just to give you a hint about it, 2 of the teams that they've beaten are in my bottom 5. That kind of is why they're at 4 for now. But if they continue to get wins, nobody cares, right? So that's what they're trying to do. And so far, they're off to a great start. At number 5 is the last undefeated team, which is the Seattle Seahawks. They had another nail-biter win. They've been getting the job done. Geno Smith has gone back to the way he looked a couple years ago. And even with the injury of Kenneth Walker, they still look great with Charbonnet stepping in, and they continue to stay undefeated. So they are the number 5 team this week in my top 5. Now for the worst 5. At number 28, got to put the Cleveland Browns. Cleveland Browns offensive line is bad. Deshaun Watson looks bad. He can't get out of the way. It's not all on Deshaun Watson, but for the way that they are paying him, they just expect more. I know they're dying to get Nick Chubb back, but at the rate things are going, by the time he gets back, they may not even be in playoff contention anymore. The one good thing is that Cincinnati is winless, so they're not in last place. So that's a plus, but they still right now are at number 28 with what they've put on the field. At number 29, we have the Miami Dolphins. Miami Dolphins are also 1-2. And mainly the reason why they're at this bottom is because with Tua out, we saw that Skylar Thompson is just not the guy. If you just look at the stat sheet and see his completion percentage, you're like, oh, he didn't play too bad. But if you actually watch the game, it was awful. He looked like he was lost. He couldn't get anything done. I believe he was sacked 5 times. And if that's who they trot out for these next games until Tua clears IR and decides he wants to come back and play, Miami's going to stay in the bottom 5 for the rest of the season. At the number 30 spot, I got to go with Cincinnati Bengals. They're one of the last 3 teams who haven't won a game yet. They're 0-3. I would say out of the winless teams, they are the best, but that doesn't really mean anything. Other teams in their division are getting wins and they're taking losses in arguably the toughest division in football. There's no way they're going to be able to make the playoffs if they continue to lose. I believe there's only one team in the last 129 who have started 0-3 that have made the playoffs. So they're definitely in a hole they don't want to be in, but they got to figure it out. They got to figure it out quickly if they want to rise. Right now, they deserve to be at number 30. At number 31, the team that we talked about earlier, Jacksonville Jaguars. They got obliterated. They haven't won a game. Trevor Lawrence looks like he's missing something. They've got tons of talent on the team, offense and defensively. They just cannot put it together, and they look pretty miserable. Thankfully, though, they're not the worst team. At number 32, it's the Tennessee Titans. And I feel bad for the Tennessee Titans because their defense is actually really good. They got good players. They fly around. They're very aggressive. They make good plays. But their quarterback is awful. I have a friend who's a Tennessee Titans fan, and I text him during the game, I think you guys might have the dumbest quarterback in the league right now because the decisions that Will Levis makes, the turnovers he creates, it's just unnecessary. Like, if he would just take a sack every time he got in a dicey situation, Tennessee might have 2 wins on the season. But because he's trying to force throws when he shouldn't and just seems to be unaware of situations, they look terrible. So right now, the Tennessee Titans are the worst team in the league, and they come in number 32 on the worst 5 after NFL week number 3. So that's it for this week's episode. Again, I want to thank you all for tuning in. Please be sure to check some of the other episodes if you've missed them. And again, please like and subscribe and share the video wherever you can. Appreciate all the engagement, and I look forward to seeing you in the next episode. Peace.